Okay, I've been sitting on this idea a little bit too long, and I want to start to get it to you. The world is different than you think, and there's some amazing things that are possible that once you have LOI, and again, that doesn't mean it has to be from me, but once you know certain ideas, it's pretty amazing what results you can get. And one of those things is that fear, any kind of negative connotation or aspect of fear is going to not be necessary pretty much fully in your life. You're not going to need to experience any kind of negative sense of fear. Um, and I got some good feedback on people seem to like having me down here in the corner of the screen. How you doing? I'm down up there. I even moved over the text a little bit so there's a space for me to sit here in the corner. And I'll try not to use the pause button very much. After one or two or three times of using the pause button, then the audio tends to get out of sync with the video. Uh, so that's one of the problems. I usually like to use the pause button, but we'll see. I'll try it. No fear. All right. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Um, the Here's what's going to be interesting about fear. Now, I wish that one of my talents, and it's not, unfortunately, is to come up with these like really poignant, moving, memorable anecdotes. Once in a while, I might do that by accident, but there's some speakers that are just great at that, right? Where it's like everything out of their mouth is this like powerful anecdote that punctuates this point. And unfortunately, that's not one of the skills that I've either been born with or developed yet. So it's mostly just logic and such, maybe some examples, but even those I have to push for to try to get them out. But anyway, we only have me to work with at this point, so but I want to get this idea to you. As I said, I might not have the examples great or poignant anecdotes, but at least what I will be able to do, guaranteed, here is give you the tools and some building blocks or whatever, the construction materials and the tools, so that for yourself you can build an understanding where you won't need to have the negative issues of fear. I say the negative issues because there's different meanings. The word fear, just like a lot of words, can have different cultural meanings and different. Like most every word has a sort of vague blurriness that defines it. So there might be some things or people might have some idea like you need a little bit of fear or that or this or that. So you'll have a better understanding of what I mean. But just to be kind of shorthanded right now, or I don't know how to say that right, but simplistic right now, I'll just say that you won't need to have the negative. So it's not like I can guarantee that you'll watch this video and never feel some negative aspect of fear again, but I can tell you that you'll have building blocks to do that. And I've been sort of using myself as a bit of a guinea pig with this since I figured it out several weeks ago, and it's quite correct. So gonna have something pretty awesome for you here. Again, it won't necessarily be fully done for you, but the tools and the construction materials will be given to you, and you should be able to take off with it if you choose to. So fear can really only refer to one of two things. You can either be afraid of being permanently screwed, and what's going to be interesting is that pretty much that's what's going on with your brain. And now you're going to need to take full advantage of what I'm going to tell you. You're probably going to need some of the background information that you get from me other places in order to kind of fully and more immediately understand what I'm saying. So a sort of law of implication veteran will probably be able to take advantage of this quicker and easier than someone where this is one of the first videos that you're watching. But if it's one of the first videos that you're watching, it's pretty helpful as an early video. So you're going to get benefit one way or the other. People that have watched a lot of other videos will probably think, oh, damn, I wish I'd had this a lot earlier. So one way or the other, you're going to be in good shape. So our mind doesn't think through things, and we're not aware of our own minds, and our minds don't think things through as much as we kind of assume in a way. It's not that we would assert that our minds think through things a certain amount or not, but just we sort of act and assume away without even really realizing it. The idea that our mind has sort of thought stuff through when it really hasn't. So it's going to turn out that really the things that you feel afraid of that are messing with you, either giving you negative feelings of fear or kind of messing up your ability to act, and or either kind of paralyzing you or messing with your strategy and your feeling of what's important. So those are sort of three drawbacks, right? Is the feeling itself of being afraid, which is no fun sometimes, especially when it's particularly not fun. Once in a while, you can think of times that it might be a little bit fun, or to experience fear. Or like obvious example might be a movie, if that's fun for you. I don't myself really love like fearful movies, but some people might. Or it might be like an itch, and then it's fun to scratch it, where you feel afraid, but then you feel like someone that comforts you, or something like that. But anyhow, there's definitely times when fear takes over or affects us in a way that we really don't want, where it's not pleasant. And then on top of that, it can cause us to make bad decisions. And on top of that, it can cause us to not take action and be sort of paralyzed. So all of those three things, the negative feeling, the bad decisions, and the paralyzation, we don't want those. It's going to turn out that when that's going on, that really what our brain is coming to the conclusion of is that whatever the object or the event of our fear is, right? We're always going to be afraid of either something happening or some sort of object, right? Some sort of news. Essentially an event, right, in the future. Then it's going to come down to something. And so right here, I'm going to tell you something pretty insightful, and that it's right here on the slide. It comes down to our brain is getting up to the point where the object or the event of our fear happens, and then it's not really thinking through past that, and it's just kind of getting stuck right there. And so it ends up concluding, but not in a way that you're really aware of it. It's just you're just sort of vaguely aware of it and feel it. But if you look more closely at what's going on, which people don't when they're feeling fear, but if you were to, and then you're aware of what I'm telling you, you'll spot this. It constantly comes down to this fear of being permanently screwed. Like the movie sort of ends right there at the object of your fear happening, and maybe wallowing in the bad event for a little while, and then it's like the movie ends with like text that says like, and then you're screwed forever, right? And there's like a black screen that says you're screwed forever, and that's it. And that's sort of what's going on. As you come to realize that, and then if we skip down here, and when I say the first, by which I mean this first line here, the fear of being permanently screwed, it's going to turn out that if you think about it, you can never know that you're going to be permanently screwed. As a matter of fact, whenever you think it through, you'll realize that you're not going to be permanently screwed. Even if you actually all the way physically die from something that might theoretically come up, then even then you don't know what happens after your body dies here on Earth, right? Maybe you're in a terrific shape after that, right? There's all sorts of reports of people dying and things are just awesome, right? Or they have a near-death experience, they die, they come back, and they're like, it was great, but then their life is transformed and they do even better here on Earth and all that stuff. So I'm not commenting one way or the other on what happens, but I'm just saying it's totally plausible that things are terrific after you die. So even if you all the way die, then you don't know that you're permanently screwed. And then if you don't, then in any case, if you're alive, then you can, and if you think things through, then what would you do if there's some setback, small or large? Then, or what would you ideally do? Like if you were a character in a video game and you got to control yourself, or if you were a character in a book and the object or the event of your fear happened, then, or if you were watching a movie and cheering for the person or kind of shouting something at the screen, you wouldn't say like, all right, now climb in, like curl into a ball and just start crying and forever, right? And just sit there until you starve to death. You wouldn't be yelling that at the screen, right? You'd be saying, come on, bounce back. Like, all right, now, like this is your situation, so acknowledge it and start to figure out how to move forward, right? Best, like figure out where you want to get to, right? After have some kind of setback or you're screwed in some way. And if you could shout at the movie screen, right, of yourself, then you'd be saying, come on, like pull it together and figure out where you want to get to and just start getting towards there, right? And if you combine that with the core not OMG, but LOI, Law of Implication method, then what does that mean? You start to take an inventory and build on what you actually know, right? And one of the things that you'll know in any situation is you probably don't, like, if it seems like a bad situation, then one thing you know is you don't want to stay in that, right? So you want things to be better. And so you could start with there. Then you could say, well, what would better look like, right? And then how might I get there? And then if you don't know how to start, well, how might I figure out where to start? So you're asking positive questions, right? You're getting a sense of how things are stacked up right now, how reality is, and then asking positive questions about how to get to a better place. So that's what you do. So, and then given that you would do that, then now we just figured out you're not permanently screwed, are you? Because whatever would happen, if you think it through, what you would do at that point is you would, especially what would you do if you were yelling at yourself on a movie screen, especially, right? You wouldn't be yelling to just sit there and wallow in pity, right? Or be upset or throw a temper tantrum. You wouldn't be like, throw a longer temper tantrum. You know, like if you saw yourself on a movie screen getting upset about a particularly bad event happening, you might understand. But you wouldn't be like yelling and cheering that you're not getting upset and throwing a tantrum or curling into a ball long enough, right? If you curled into a ball or got upset for a little while, you might understand it if you're watching yourself. But you wouldn't be saying, do that longer, do that longer. Like at the point where you see yourself rise up and start to move forward and triumph, you wouldn't be yelling, stop that, stop that. You need to throw more of a tantrum and get more upset, right? And be more sorry for yourself. Surely instead you'd be cheering, right? Seeing the person rise up and say and move forward, right? So in terms of some practical what to do advice, and this may work to a great degree, just already, just hearing me explain this. So try this. Next time and each time you feel like you're afraid of something, or a certain type of worry that amounts to being afraid of something, then think through, imagine the scenario, imagine the event happening that you're afraid of, but then notice how it kind of terminates right there at first in your mind, where your mind doesn't probably immediately jump to how you're going to triumph in that situation. Instead, the movie just kind of ends right there. And that's exactly why you're afraid, is your mind has worked through to the bad event and stopped. And because it stopped, it concludes that you're permanently screwed. Not out of any sense of real calculation, but because it just stopped. Not because it means to stop or anything. It's just that your brain works by templates and association by default and successive approximation. And it just got to a block and didn't know how to get around it using its default method. And so then it just feels afraid. But it's not based on some like enlightenment or deep wisdom. Quite the opposite. It's just based on default thinking doing what default thinking does, which is when it really gets stuck, it just kind of kicks up a fuss. But as soon as you consciously interact with that, it's the easiest thing in the world to, especially with a little bit of insight and practice, to see, oh, okay, it was just stuck for no reason. It's like I have this robot that is a vacuum, like it's called like a robot, or it might literally be called the robot or something else. But it's like this vacuum. It looks like a bathroom scale approximately, and it just like goes around randomly vacuuming your floor all by itself. But sometimes it gets stuck, right? It's automated. So of course something like that is going to get stuck, and then it has a little thing that it says in its little screen about what to do. Like, please plug me back in, or please clean out my brush or something like that. It's kind of funny. And it doesn't talk. It just kind of beeps, and then it writes it on the little screen, right? And so if I thought that I somehow was that robot, or that's how we are with our minds, is like people think that they are their minds by accident. But it's the easiest thing in the world with a robot. If it gets stuck, you just say, oh, okay, it's stuck, and then you unstick it. It's quite literally can be that easy with your mind and fear, where fear is so easy. It's just getting stuck, just like anything that's automated. It's not like the robot, the vacuum robot, is designed badly. It's just that there's nothing they can do. It's built to kind of go with a person consciously interacting with it sometimes and getting it unstuck. So fear is just your brain getting stuck at, oh, I'm screwed, and then it's stuck, so it's like it's permanent. But it isn't like calculating that it's permanent or not. It's just stuck. So the trend is, your mind also makes trends out of things very quickly. And it's another mistake by default that your brain makes. People see trends really fast, and also in a ridiculous way, where it's a trend except for the fact you could so easily change it if you wanted to. But people really get wrapped up in that. That's kind of a tangent, so I'm not going to get too into that. But if you think about it, you might see what I mean, and how I get a lot of benefit in life from not getting just caught up in that something's a trend just because it happened a few times and nobody's unsticking it. Any kind of negative trend is often pretty easy to unstick, even as soon as you notice it, so that it's no longer a trend. It's not out of your control. So same thing with fear. It's just this simple thing where your brain is stuck, but it's so easy for you to deal with, just like that vacuum robot. And so you just take a look at it. Predictably, it's always going to be the same thing. There's an event that's a setback, and your brain doesn't know how to navigate around it by default quickly and easily. And so it gives you fear. Once you take a look at it, it's going to be pretty easy and obvious, especially with a little bit of insight and understanding. But the same type of solution will work again and again, just like I outlined for you a few minutes ago. And every situation is basically going to come down to, all right, so here's the situation, here's the reality, and where do I want to get to, and how do I start getting there, or how do I start figuring out how to start getting there, right? Once you have that general sense of things, of how to, then you just take a look at where your brain got stuck, and you see the scenario, see what's going on, and then imagine yourself working through the situation and triumphing. And it's in almost every case, it's super easy to do. And if you're just afraid of like pain, right? Let's say you're going to go to the dentist and you're worried about it being painful. I also am radically different with this, and I've been for a while actually, where pain is just a signal, and if you don't believe that it's bad, it takes away so much of its power. So much of physical pain, of the badness, of the conscious experience of badness regarding physical pain, is that your brain says, not only are you in pain, but you should really feel bad about that. And it makes those into one of the, it looks like one big thing, the physical pain and the like emotional sense of that's terrible. But you can actually separate the two, and you can feel the pain as a signal without believing that you should feel bad about it. Because it's never true. Something that I teach kind of is a very basic thing pretty early on in a number of my recordings is this idea, and different introductory recordings that I've done, the idea that you should feel bad is always incorrect. Once I figured that out, and then I generalized that to physical pain, then you can feel pain without feeling like you should feel bad about it. And then however bad it is, that's how bad it is. And then it's also gone, right? It's over. So if I go to the dentist and there's a certain amount of physical pain, there's no reason why I'm going to feel bad about that. And I certainly don't need to feel bad ahead of time. However bad it's going to be is literally how bad it's going to be. And I'm not going to, there's no extra. So there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's just going to be a certain sensation, and it's going to be as bad as it's going to be, and then I'll be done. And I can't really control it, right, or do much about it. So why on earth am I going to worry about it? And I'm not going to be permanently screwed. So there's nothing to be afraid of. I'm just going to go there, get things taken care of, and be better off. So where's the bad emotion of that? Where's bad about that? If it's bad, I just wouldn't do it. If I'm going to do it, then it must be good, right? And so it's all fine. If someone can go to the gym, and when people go to the gym and they can feel pain, and they'll say it's a good pain, right? And they won't actually feel like bad about the pain. You see? So people fully have the ability to experience pain and not feel bad about it. Or sometimes people can be even just outside in the cold, and either they just know it's temporary and it's not a big deal if they feel some pain from just the cold on their face or some wind, or they might not like it, but they don't go to pieces over it. There's actually lots of times when we just experience pain similar to or worse than the dentist, but it's just kind of normal, or it sneaks up on us, or we expect it and we know it's going to end, and it doesn't feel like it's going to hurt us, and like permanently. And so we don't think twice about it. Or at the gym, if people think that it's actually helping them, then they totally reframe the exact same feeling of pain or worse pain, but they don't feel bad about it. So you could do the exact same thing with pain that you would have felt bad about. It's still the same root. Is your brain is concluding, if it's something where there's going to be physical pain, but you're going to also feel bad about it and feel afraid of it, it's because your brain is equating that physical pain with a permanent screwedness. I know I'm using kind of a slang term with screwed, but it really kind of captures the meaning better than any non-slang term I can think of. That's why I'm using the word screwed. So there's a sense that your brain, when you're going to the dentist, let's say if it really bothers you, there's a way that your brain is taking that pain and equating it with a real injury to your body, where it's setting you back, it's hurting your body, in a way that it's not also working through that it'll be fine. And so your brain concludes that it's a permanent setback. And that's where the feeling of this is terrible pain is coming from. It's not that the physical sensation is so bad. It's a parallel track of an emotion that you don't have to buy into. And when you don't believe it, when you work through it logically, like I've done with you, then it really will be a different situation. And again, when you realize that, hey, wait, I felt this exact same pain at other times and it's been not nearly so badly emotional. And then when you realize the difference is if you think that the so-called pain is genuinely helping you, like at the gym, or if it's just not really hurting you, if it's just some cold on your face and you're going to warm up when you get home, then, or if you, so something surprisingly hit you and for a second it bothered you, but you also realize you weren't injured and you're fine, then sometimes just if someone bumps into you or jabs you by accident with something in a certain way, then the pain might be just as sharp as the dentist, but it didn't really bother you, or it bothered you for a second, but you don't feel like you're permanently injured, and so you're fine. So start to notice that. So the root here is, or the core idea is, it's always going to be your brain incorrectly. And now you might say to me, wait a second, David, how do we know that it's incorrect? Maybe our brain is right. Maybe we are permanently screwed. Well, the cool thing is that your brain and you can never know the future that well, that you can't know that you're going to be permanently screwed by anything. What you can know is that no matter what happens, you're going to want to move positively forward, right? Literally, no matter what situation you find in your life, isn't it true that exactly what you're going to want to do is to move forward to make your life and other people's lives better, right? Or the value of your experience, your goodness. So that literally, no matter what your situation, you could be like, I think of like 24, where he's like captured by the Chinese and like taken to like be put in jail and torture. It's kind of one of my extreme little examples or scenarios that pops to mind for me, like with Jack Bauer in this TV show 24. But anyhow, no matter what situation you find yourself in, the answer is always the same, right? You are going to want to just try to make life the best you can given the resources and the situation that you're starting with, right? You're always trying to move forward to have things be more positive one way or the other. And if you can't move forward physically, then you can work on your mind and come up with better ideas in your mind, right? So you're never permanently blocked. So there's no such thing as knowing that you are permanently screwed. And there's no way that, and it's always going to be counterproductive to just presume that you're permanently screwed or just curl up into a ball, right? And throw a tantrum or a pity party or something. So you can't know. And so why would you just fabricate it, right? It's just silly. So there you go. So I was saying the first here can never be known and pretty much makes no sense. And the method to dissolve it I already talked to you about. Each and every time you feel fear, you just go and take a look at the scenario and then continue it forward in time to where you are working through the situation and coming through it. Now, let me deal with the idea of how we can be afraid of like a temporary setback. Like, let's say we are driving somewhere and we take a wrong turn and we're like, oh man, I'm afraid that I've been going in the wrong direction for a while, or I'm afraid of getting an email in my email box. It's going to be some kind of setback, or cause me, maybe David, I'm not afraid that I'll be permanently screwed, but I'm afraid that I'm going to have to spend 3 hours of work to undo some issue. Well, here's the thing about temporary setbacks. The idea of a temporary setback that you're going to be afraid of or that you're going to feel bad about is once again actually turns out to be nonsense. So because it's always compared to fantasy. You may have heard me use the following idea, which illustrates this really kind of poignantly, I think. It's a little bit trivial, but it's pretty poignant in it. Anyway, so the idea here is that there's plenty of places that you go throughout your week where there might be a 5-minute drive, 10-minute drive, even like a half an hour or 45-minute drive. And where you totally have no problem driving that, let's say something's 20 minutes away that you like to go to, right? Could be a restaurant, right? Or a gym or whatever, or a friend. Let's just say it's the gym. So you might think, all right, I want to go to the gym. 20 minutes, you get in your car, you happily drive there. Now let's compare that with the gym is 5 minutes away, and you knew that, right? It's like a parallel life. And then on the way there, you get in a traffic jam that wait that holds you up for 15 minutes, and then you feel upset about that. Or worse, someone just like on purpose does something that's pretty wrong to you that holds you up for 15 minutes in a way where they've genuinely kind of wronged you or gotten in your way when they shouldn't have. But the end result of it is that it took you 20 minutes to get there. But the fascinating thing is that if you had all along just been going to a gym that was 20 minutes away, then you could have been totally fine with the whole situation and it never would have bothered you at all. The exact same result. The only difference is in one case you have a fantasy of getting there in 5 minutes when in fact it was always going to take you 20. Even if some person wronged you and in wronging you somehow they made it take 15 minutes extra for you to get there, the end result is exactly the same, right? That it took you 20 minutes to get there. In one scenario, you always knew it was going to take you 20 minutes and you're perfectly fine with that and you were never upset about it. And you felt you were happy the whole time. You're maybe using your mind to work on a problem or think things through or just enjoy the music or whatever. In the other situation, it took you the exact same 20 minutes. You could have enjoyed it just as much, but instead maybe you're upset about this setback. And yet there was it's compared to a non-existent reality in which it only took you 5 minutes. Now, it might only be 5 minutes away driving in one of those cases, but if it was going to take you 20 minutes on a particular day because of something that was going to happen to you outside of your control or outside of what maybe your mind could have thought about, could have predicted something that would have happened to hold you up, but it didn't. If that was the case, it still was basically outside of your control, right? If your mind didn't think of it, even if it theoretically could have, right? It isn't in our control to be omniscient or to always think of everything, ideally, that we could have predicted. So one way or the other, in one case, the gym is 5 minutes away, sort of physically driving, but something came up, and the reality was that day it was 20 minutes away, right? So it's only compared to a non-existent reality that day it could take you 5 minutes. And it's only in comparison to that fantasy that it's upsetting. Now, I'm talking about being upsetting rather than being afraid, but the exact same logic or thought process applies to something that you're afraid of. So if you're afraid of a setback, the only difference between a setback and just a natural path, so let's suppose you have a setback where you have to spend an extra 3 hours working on something that came up one day for your work that you were afraid of happening, and then it happened. Someone hacked your website and it took you 3 hours to undo the damage they did. Well, there could have been another situation where you ended up getting the same result, but you always thought it would take you 3 hours, right? Or maybe a total of 5 hours, but given that you had to deal with a hack and then do some other work. But there's other times when you already thought it was going to be 5 hours for the same result, and you'd be totally fine and encouraged the whole time you're working on it. In both cases, the reality was it was going to take you 5 hours. So it's only a setback compared to a fantasy. Do you see? It's not a setback compared to another reality. There was no reality in which the person didn't hack your website, right? In reality, they did, and it took you 3 hours in my example here to undo it. So the being upset about a setback and being afraid of one that might happen amounts to the same nonsensical thing, because it could also be that you naturally thought that it was going to take you 5 hours, like it was going to take you that full extra amount of time, and you were just perfectly fine with that, right? There's plenty of tasks in your life. You do this every day, every day, is you perform tasks, you expect them to take a certain amount of time, and they do, and you're perfectly happy performing them. And then yet we'll be scared of something taking longer than we thought, literally, right? So imagine that. Imagine being afraid of something taking you longer than you expected. Well, there's just something wrong with your whole understanding of life at that point. Where if you expect something to take 5 hours and it does, you're perfectly happy. If you expect it to take 2 hours and then something you're afraid of comes up and it takes 5, and now you're afraid prior to it and unhappy while it's happening. In both cases, it took 5 hours, but the only difference is what you expected or what your mind expected. And then on top of that, let's say it takes you 3 hours to fix, but then it takes you another hour to complain about it to somebody on the phone. It takes up another hour of that person's time hearing you complain about it, and plus you feel a bunch of negative emotions, and you think about it at night. It keeps you up, and you're upset there. And then maybe you're afraid ahead of time, and you spent half an hour feeling inefficient and paralyzed with fear. Well, that's all pointless. Do you see? It's all compared to nothing. It boils down to nonsense. That all you had to have done was expect it, and expect that it would be natural, and you would have felt fine. And so I'm not even saying that the solution is to expect the object of your fear to happen. That it might seem like I'm saying that. I'm saying something different and really cool. I won't necessarily be able to fully develop this concept. It's an amazing concept. I'm about to share with you another concept building on this. But it is so funny. Once you get it, it's really nuts. So I already helped you here by showing how it's kind of nonsense with this temporary setback thing. Really what's going on when it comes to fear is really your brain is seeing it as a permanent setback. See, what's going on is even that 3 hours, it's going to feel permanently lost to your brain. And all you need to do is find a way out of it being a permanent screwness, setback, a permanent thing, and you'll no longer feel afraid. And so regarding that 3 hours being lost forever, and I haven't gotten to the cool concept yet. I'm just kind of wrapping up here and then I'll get to it. But I want to give you something kind of complete and useful so far without the next concept, and then I'll give you a cool concept as we wrap up. But so this, either you're permanently screwed and you work through that and show how you can triumph anyway, and then the fear will go away. Next is the idea of this temporary setback, but then your brain is concluding that you're actually permanently screwed because those 3 hours are like lost forever. And instead just find a way to make it unpermanent, where you'd say, look, all that's really happening is that 3 hours is going to cut into my leisure time. And it means that I've lost 3 hours of leisure. But all that means is that instead of just relaxing or being entertained for 3 hours, then I had to do some extra work. But then it's over. And then I wake up the next day and it's all finished. I just got a little less leisure time yesterday. But when I wake up the next day, it's all over. And it's as if it never happened. Right? Just something like that, getting rid of the permanent nature of it, just in how your brain's encoding it or evaluating the situation or representing it. You get rid of that and the fear will go away. And maybe when you're starting out with this, it might not work perfectly. I really don't know. Because for me, it's hard to separate myself from the rest of what I understand about the mind and how I don't think that my mind is me and so forth. Sometimes people have a hard time immediately applying stuff I share with them because they're so sure that their mind is them and they feel like they're fooling themselves when in fact they're not. They're just fixing their mind. And so you could have some deeper blocks maybe that interfere with this, but that'll, like, if you work through those, and all the more reason to listen to more Law of Implication and see what other blocks you have. But ultimately, this should work for you if there's not other blocks that you're having. But there's nothing incorrect about what I'm sharing with you here. It's very useful and profound and really is the root of fear and getting rid of it. One other thing that I just want to give you an indication of, so you have all the tools. This will be pretty simple. You'll have to use it as a tool, but the tool itself will be simple as long as you use it. Life boils down also to resource management, right? You have limited resources and you're trying to be happy and get your results with limited resources. So obviously it's resource management. You want to use your resource as leveraged as possible in the best way possible. It's fine if you don't. You just want to be seeking to do that the best you can, and then you get better with doing it. Life isn't about getting everything right away. But anyhow, if you're planning and you phrase something in a way where you say, okay, if I do this, I'm afraid that I'll run into this problem, then that's not really fear. Like if you're planning and you think, if I do this, it won't work very well, or you might phrase it like, I'm afraid that won't work. And that's fine. That's just how we learn to talk and think, unfortunately. But that isn't necessarily fear. When you're planning, it doesn't ultimately make sense if you think about it, that you're sitting there afraid of like if I'm getting driving directions, it isn't like you're afraid of going on the wrong street. You just obviously don't want to do that because you're trying to get to your goal. So you don't like need to feel fear in order to just want to drive in the right direction. So you don't need either fear to motivate yourself when you're planning. You just want to get where you're going and plan to use your resources best. And you don't need to be afraid of saying, well, if I don't plan well enough, I might take a wrong turn. You don't need fear there, or frame it in terms of fear. If you do and you don't feel bad about that, then you're just kind of using language, which is fine. But you don't need to like feel afraid that if I don't plan properly, I might not get the right result. If you're thinking that you should maybe plan more, then you can go ahead and just plan more. Uh, but there's a way in which when you're doing strategy and resource management, you don't really need to think of it in terms of fear one way or the other. You're just thinking in terms of what you think is will better get your result, or what you think will not get your result or take you backwards, or something like that. If you're noticing fear in a way that seems counterproductive, then that's when you come right back and do this. So if you're planning and thinking, wait a second, I actually do think that fear is messing with me and causing me to make bad decisions as I'm planning, then go and see, all right, what am I afraid of? Am I afraid of someone rejecting me, or saying something, giving me like negative feedback or something? Then then go through and imagine you get that negative feedback, or imagine the event that you're afraid of happening, and then imagining working through that situation and coming out just fine, and working towards your goal despite that happening. And that'll work through your fear, and then the fear should go away, uh, because because again, the fear, your brain gives you fear when it has not worked through the scenarios. Your brain doesn't actually work through scenarios as we might assume. When you work through a scenario with your brain and take things forward and look at them in more clear detail, of what's going to happen and what you'll do if something happens, and then what you do after that, and then looking kind of around like kind of sideways as well, not just forward in time, but look around like in a certain event and see what else you can do and what alternatives are. Your brain doesn't actually do that on its own. It does it like a little bit in a kind of a certain way, with it just associating and with templates and so forth, but it doesn't do anything like what happens if you walk through the scenarios yourself consciously with your brain. Your brain is part of that process. When you're working through the scenarios, it's not like you're doing it in your brain, isn't it? You're doing it with your brain. You're kind of guiding your brain to do it. But if you don't guide it consciously, it's not going to do anything like that. However, the more you guide your mind consciously through scenarios, it becomes very quick and easy for your brain to do it. And probably, I think what goes on with me at this point, because my brain tends to come up with the right stuff pretty naturally, pretty much by default these days. Not like all the time, but way more than it used to. Like the things I come up with are pretty quick and fast and correct these days, just constantly. Not like all the time, but way more than before, and pretty and with a very high percentage compared to either myself or even other people at this point, realistically, in most cases. So anyway, my point here is that as you work through scenarios more and more, your brain probably does it more even behind the scenes, or the similar effect to it, and you're just basically going to get smarter and smarter, functionally speaking. So it gets easier and easier. Okay, let me then, so that kind of rounds that out pretty well. Remember, so with strategy, either you're talking about you're afraid of something happening, but it's not really, it's kind of not hurting you at all. You're just saying, okay, I don't want to go the wrong direction, so I'm going to plan properly not to. If you feel like you're not moving forward because you just feel like planning and you're not taking action, then you might have a fear that's blocking you. And notice we naturally use the word block, and the fear of blocking you. And what's that block? It's you haven't guided your mind through the event or object of your fear and on through to the other side of it, where you deal effectively with that situation. So you unblock yourself that way. So excellent. So this is excellent tools. You're all set now. You build on this and build the kind of building that I've given you the materials and the tools for, and you can get to where pretty much fear, any kind of negative aspect of fear regarding emotion, decision making, or paralyzation, can pretty much be gone from your life. I assume it's not going to happen right away for you, but it might. But I'm pretty much there, just so you know. I've been most of the way there already, but then figuring this out really finished nailing it for me. So it's got to be pretty plausible to do. It's not like I'm saying this and I don't experience it or live it. This is kind of like Greg talking about SEO, or anyone, any one of our coaches talking about SEO when they're actually ranking and doing stuff. Like, this is reality for me. I'm currently doing very well with this, and have been for a long time. And this final thing about being permanently screwed gave me kind of a final or extra excellent breakthrough with this, where it even took it to one more level for myself. I had very little fear in my life before it, but then it particularly got rid of any kind of extra or lingering amount within reason. I don't mean that it's fully gone. There's certainly things that come up where it's going to take some of my mind share. I'm going to feel something close to fear or whatever in some extreme circumstances. Probably. I don't want to come across like I'm super arrogant about this or anything, but I can testify you in an encouraging way that you can really be in incredible shape when it comes to fear and so forth. All right, let me touch on this, and I'm not sure how far I'll go in this recording with this next idea. It's hilarious. This is, in one sense, it's a really cool concept that I've been looking forward to for a long time, actually developing, and I'd never quite gotten to it. There's so much stuff that I know and I want to share with you, believe it or not, still. After all the recordings I've done, I almost have more now than when I started. But this is one of those things, and it's so funny. Let me give you, this is one of those things where I actually do have an example. I don't know how hard hitting this example is going to be. But ultimately, I'll just kind of testify or promise you or whatever. This is a crazy concept that's totally useful, way more than it might seem at first. It's shockingly useful. The block at first will be that you're fooling yourself, but once you break through that block and you realize what I'm really saying, so at first you might misinterpret what I'm saying in terms of fooling yourself, and it won't feel like it's going to work for you. If you can get through that block and really get what I mean at some point, it's crazy. It's unbelievably useful. It's hilarious. So what'll happen is our brain will be irrational, and people don't take proper advantage of that. They kind of lose the battle right there when their brain gives them like an irrational fear, for example. But the hilarious thing is once you can catch your brain being irrational, then you automatically win. It is so funny because it's like if you ever read like a fantasy book where there's like a dream world where the main character or whoever realizes that they can just control stuff with their mind, and before all this stuff is sort of happening to them and being done to them in this dream world, but then they realize they can like coat themselves in armor and make a sword appear out of nowhere, and they can kind of take over it, and then they use the strength of their will and their mind, and they defeat the bad guy because they realize they can take control and so forth. That's kind of a recurring theme here and there in certain books. I feel like I'm sure just in the fantasy genre, but that's how it works with your brain and when it's irrational, once you understand it properly. So I kind of stumbled across this when I was little, and unfortunately by me giving this sense, it might kind of trivialize it, but there's a way to use this when you're as an adult and being older that is truly awesome. But and I had some natural gifts in this area early on, and so I did discover a few things when I was quite young that really were extremely helpful and insightful, but when I tell them to people, they don't really tend to hit them very hard. But whatever. Anyhow, one way or the other, I'll tell you the story. So I remember I had watched Gremlins, which I have no idea how that became a kid's movie or how it was presented as a kid movie because it's incredibly scary, right? And with a little cute mogwai, but if you feed them after midnight, then they turn into this horrendous, murderous monster. And if they touch water, they multiply. And then at one point, the terrible monster fell into a pool, and there was like zillions of these horrible monsters literally killing people and like mangling people and so forth. It was this total horror movie that was made for kids. So by Spielberg, I watched it when I was a kid, and then at night I'd be scared as heck. Keep these recordings PG-13 or whatever. But anyhow, almost said a bad word, but I was scared as heck, and but I would be scared, and it would be dark, right? Oh, and the other thing is like the darkness, right? Something about, or at least after midnight and so forth. Because light would keep them at bay, but then in the dark they could run wild. So it's like beyond belief. It's like I don't even understand what the heck they were thinking. It almost was like they intentionally just wanted to mess with kids really badly. That was just a bizarre that movie was popular. And wasn't like outlawed or something. I don't know, but it seems pretty abusive. But anyhow, so it was kind of all the elements to like really mess with the kid's psyche. So there I was, and I would imagine all these gremlins just basically attacking me and just mangling me and killing me and so forth. But there was a way that I recognized that there was an irrationality to that, right? That it was basically my brain was just kind of coming up with these fears. And so I realized that if I was going to do that in the first place, if my brain was going to do that, then here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to imagine that my blanket is magic and can protect me. And so I would wrap myself, and maybe I wouldn't have had to wrap myself in a blanket if I came up with something even easier, like that there was an invisible shield around me too. But anyway, what I came up with at the time was my blanket could protect me and they couldn't get in there. But I did it in a way where it wasn't like I fully, like where I kind of realized what I was doing with the irrationality. So it was kind of cool. It wasn't just that I believed it exactly or not, but I was like, all right, if I'm going to be irrational, then why can't I be irrational to help myself too? Or like if my mind can be irrational to make me afraid, then it can be irrational to make me feel protected. And it actually worked. It worked like a charm. So I imagine that my blanket, but I did this on purpose. I didn't like actually believe it or not, like intellectually, but what I did believe was if it as long as it's kind of like I would put it these days in terms of a stipulation. If we stipulate that I can fully feel afraid of this ridiculous thing about gremlins attacking me, but I really felt afraid, like it wasn't fake, I felt really afraid, then I could really feel secure based on the idea of magic blanket, right? Because one's not less irrational than the other. If irrationality can hurt me, then it can help me just as strongly. And again, it actually worked, where I actually felt secure, but not because I believed, not because I just made not because my brain made a fantasy, but because I imposed it on my brain, if that makes any sense. Um, it wasn't like it'd be one thing if an adult came and told me that to kind of impose it, to kind of do it like it happened for me, then it wouldn't have been like an insight in the same way. But I actually did this myself on purpose and it worked. So that's so cool because then I understood it in a way that I could do it in the future. And it's one of these things I've never really explained very well yet. And it's a very powerful part of what I do. The results formula shortcut, I know it looks on the surface a little bit like creative visualization or something similar to what other people teach, but I actually baked this magic blanket thing into it in a certain way so people could benefit from it without me having to explain this to them, because I think it's actually harder to understand what I'm saying here than the results formula shortcut people can buy into easier. But I sort of baked into it in a certain way, and so it's part of how I design that. It goes beyond just creative visualization. Because it wasn't like when I was young and having this issue with the gremlins and the magic blanket, it wasn't creative visualization that saved me. It was the matching irrationality with irrationality that saved me, so to speak. And that's the results formula shortcut actually does that too. And if you're wondering about where that is, that's the first video in my 2013 series. On the top of the page, great advice. It's a shortcut where I don't explain everything, but it kind of bakes in a bunch of things that work that you can use before you understand the deeper concepts. But now I'm explaining to you one of the concepts behind it. And again, you may now be having a block where you feel like you're fooling yourself. The whole point of this is to get to the point, which you can get to, where you correctly realize that this is not about fooling yourself. It has to do with stipulation and recognizing irrationality. It's saying, oh, we're on the playing field of irrationality now. That's awesome. I love it. If I catch my brain being irrational in a way that it's really affecting me, then that's terrific, because now all bets are off. Now I can just decide anything I want, and my brain has to give that, like give me the emotions of it and give me the actions and effect of it. So if I'm feeling like irrationally lazy or scared, then great. I just imagine instead some sort of the equivalent of like a superhero or whatever, or even just a character. Not like an act. I don't even bother with it. I don't personally ever imagine myself as an actual superhero. Instead, I'll imagine myself as just a personality. Like I'll just fabricate a personality where I can go do a certain thing and not. I won't just fabricate abilities that I have. That's different. I don't just decide like I can swim perfectly or something like that. But although that itself apparently can work too. But I will imagine that I'm somebody who can happily, like let's say I didn't want to go to lab class. I wasn't a big fan of like labs in school. Like laboratory classes, it's not like learning and explaining concepts. It's like measuring stuff and not spilling stuff, which I was never very good at not spilling stuff. Uh, so, and just for other reasons I didn't particularly enjoy. But as soon as I would notice myself thinking that I wouldn't enjoy it, well, that's irrational. Why wouldn't, like, just deciding not to enjoy something that I have to do is totally counterproductive. So instead, I would imagine that I was a person who just totally enjoyed it. And it would work because I understand this deep thing where if my brain's going to be irrational, then great, I win. I just come up with something else and my brain can't argue with me. What's my brain going to say? Oh, no, you're not really a guy who likes lab. And I'll be like, well, who am I then? It's like a guy who doesn't like lab. Like, well, where'd you come up with that crap, right? Actually, I'm someone that needs to do lab. And if I need to do it, then I might as well enjoy it because I'm doing it anyway. So it's only a question now of do I enjoy it or not? It's more correct to enjoy it than not. So either one, I don't know. I don't know whether I'm a guy who enjoys it or don't. What I do know, and now we're back to the core law of implication method. What I do know is it's better to enjoy it than not. And separately, I know I've decided I'm going to do it. I don't know for sure that I'm going to be better off going to lab class and doing something else, but I know that I've decided I'm going to do it. So at this point, and I know that given what I understand and about, so at this point, let's say I'm back in college, my best guess, I know for sure that my best guess is I'm going to go to lab class. Given that I'm going to do that, and it's perfectly reasonable for me to conclude that I should go to class. Given that, stipulating that, now I know absolutely for sure I would rather enjoy it than not, right? And I'd rather not only enjoy it, but be in a kind of an empowered, effective mindset when I'm there, right? I know that for sure. So there I go. So how's my brain going to argue with that? Just like with a magic blanket, I know for either one's irrational, the gremlins attacking or my magic blanket. So here's what happens. Irrationality cancels out the irrationality, and then I'm just left with what I know. So that might be an aha moment for you, it might not, or it might be tomorrow when you're reflecting on it. But the way this ultimately works is the irrationality cancels out the irrationality, and then I'm left with what I know I want. So I'm there at night. What I want to do is calmly and happily not be scared and then feel just calm and fine and happy and fall asleep, right? So I know that for sure, and then the irrationality cancels out the irrationality. The magic blanket protecting me cancels out the imagination of gremlins attacking me. They're both ridiculous, but one isn't less or more ridiculous than the other. So there you go, cancel it out, and I'm left with what I know, which is I want to feel happy, and that wins. And that's worked for me like constantly. You wouldn't believe how much I use that, and I don't really talk about it directly, but I use it all the time, and it's one of my big secrets. Not that I try to keep it a secret. I mean, it's one of my big techniques that's very powerful. Instead, I kind of simplified it into the results formula shortcut for you, which works unbelievably well. And now you can see one of the things underneath it that works. And that's the thing with me is I'm telling you, I know a lot of really cool stuff. And I have reasons for things that are deep and well built. And this is what's going on when I say I work at this for hours and hours and hours. Literally every day I work at it for hours, and that's added up for over 2 decades. So I have reasons for stuff, and so that's why trusting me is typically gonna work out very well for you. And that's why stuff like the results formula shortcut, you don't want to just project it and dumb it down into something. Not that people do this. Actually, I get a lot of good feedback from it. But you don't want to dumb stuff down or kind of twist it and say, oh, is that like this? You want the nuances of what I'm saying, or just take what I'm saying kind of separately and in a vacuum, because there's often a lot of more to it than what you think I put into it or whatever. Same reason why OMG regarding the other people in it, it kind of revolves around the idea of them trusting me. Because if I need to explain myself, they might take a few years. I put in the work. And there's a reason why I'm doing things. Sometimes it can be counterintuitive to people, or just look like I'm just acting as a lot of people act. We're just pulling in templates or just copying something, or just kind of a knee-jerk response or reaction. But instead, there's a lot of thinking that's based on deeper ideas, based on foundational ideas. So you can know that about me, and that's if that gives you any further reason to trust me. Every time I kind of pull back the curtain on something, it'll probably be like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't realize he had such a deep reason for it, or had that. So I'm not sure when I'll develop this more. Actually, that may be fairly complete in and of itself. Probably people want to talk to me about that some more, or ask me questions, or who knows. but I'll maybe wait for some feedback on this idea and see how far it gets people. But great, I've really been able to cover some terrific stuff here. Haven't hit the pause button once, so maybe the audio has been synced the whole time, and you get to see my little head talking in the corner. So one person wrote that helped them stay focused, and another person just felt happy about feeling like I'm kind of there with them even more, and so forth. So great. If this is good for you, excellent. Um, as you can know, it's not my first instinct to do it this way, so it's not that I want to be sitting here showing off myself or whatever. But if it makes people happy, then great. Maybe I can keep doing it. All right, I will talk to you again in the next recording, whatever that may be, or wherever that may be.